Right, good morning everybody. We are at 10 o'clock and we are being webcast, even though we're back into the good old familiar Oak Room. We are being webcast, so hence the fact that we've had a slight juggling of seating, and unfortunately some of the naming badges won't be quite correct, but we've done the best we can in the time available. So welcome to the Corporate Review meeting of the 10th of May. I'm not aware of any apologies, but I'll just see if there are any others that anybody else has seen or heard. I think the only person we're missing is Jeremy Pert.
No, I think I'm here.
Jeremy Oates.
Oh, Jeremy Oates, sorry. Sorry, Jeremy Oates. So I'll take it there are no apologies. Can I therefore move to item 2, which is the declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest on the items we have? Take that as a no. And that brings us to the minutes of the meeting of the 29th of March. We had some issues for future meetings, but nothing anybody wants to raise it by way of correction of those minutes. Okay, I will sign those as a true record. We've got Julie as assisting this meeting because Mandy Patterson's not available, so we'll sign the minutes when I get a copy of them to sign. Okay, that brings us to item 4, which is the integrated performance report for quarter 4 of the year that's completed, the 2021-22. Who's going to take us through that? Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for inviting us in this morning. I'm joined this morning for the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Integrated Performance Report Quarter 4 2021-22 by County Councillor Mark DeVille, County Councillor Julia Jessel and County Councillor David Williams, not just for this item but also for the next item, so that the committee can interrogate us as they see fit and any areas of particular concern. I was hoping that Mark Sutton might be available this morning, but unfortunately he's at a safeguarding board meeting, so that has had to take priority. As we know, the safeguarding of children is particularly important to us here at the county. The format of the integrated performance report continues to evolve, with Kerry Dove, who's on my right here, making it as clear and transparent as possible so that people can take a look at it, see the areas that we are dealing with, and challenge those appropriately. Just going forward to the introduction, we introduced the report by just touching on COVID again. We're also looking particularly at the economy. As we know, we're going through some periods of difficult economic times, and the economic recovery programme remains a key priority for us. The adult social care costs continue to rise, and we're continuing to address workforce issues through the Future Social Care Workforce Programme. One of the reasons why Councillor Jessel is with us and Dr. Richard Harling is because there are particular challenges that we are looking forward to in the cost of care, and maybe the committee will get the chance to speak to Councillor Jessel and Dr. Harling in due course. The new model of delivery for Children and Families Service, which was introduced last year, continues to embed well. And our work through the Building Resilient Families and Communities programme continues to support vulnerable families. We've also had good progress on the Warmer Homes scheme, which has provided significant benefits to Staffordshire residents, with over 3,500 people having access to the scheme and having help and advice. This includes 511 families benefiting from 566 home installations. And we know how important this is at the moment with the huge increases we have in fuel bills, so those people who are struggling in particular benefiting from Staffordshire Warm Homes will find some of the pressures from those increased fuel bills will be reduced. We continue to focus on sustainability issues, and Councillor Tagg is working hard to push forward on the climate change and green issues for us. And then finally, we do touch on the Ukraine situation. I noticed that Councillor Pert is wearing in his epaulet a UK Ukraine flag. I know many councillors are very supportive of the efforts that we're putting forward there. But I would say that we continue to be mindful of our legal duties when we're looking to home people from Ukraine. Our legal duties aren't trumped by the circumstances we're finding. We still have to make sure we're doing the proper checks so that those families are secure in their new venues. As far as the finance is concerned, the latest revenue forecast outturn shows a forecast saving of 4.417 million, or 0.8%. This is a relatively small amount of our overall budget, but there are some carry forward requests which will reduce that in due course. You'll note from the report that we've asked for a use of 2.702 from the contingency budget to fund the National Pay Award relating to 2021-22, and that was taken to Cabinet some time ago and approved. Moving into the report itself, Mr. Chairman, you can see on page 9 of the report the summary. This is, I think, a very simple to see overview of our circumstances, and Cabinet members who are here will be able to speak to those points directly. So to that, Mr. Chairman, I don't intend to go through each of the sections individually. You'll see it's broken down. First up is health and care, challenges faced there. Then families and communities. Then we've got economy, infrastructure and skills, and then corporate. And we can go through each of those in turn as you see fit, Mr. Chairman. That's my introduction.
Okay, there's nobody indicating yet, so rather than going through it by section, I'll just take speakers as they wish to identify. So, Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, you talk about the additional 19.25 million for 23-24 for adult social care. What assessment have you made as to whether that is going to be high enough to meet the additional challenge of the costs surrounding the social care reforms?
If I could answer that, Chairman. As you know, this is an additional sum of money and at the moment is non-recurrent, which I think is something we do have to bear in mind. Its priorities are to support hospital discharge, which is primarily the Home First scheme, which, the contract has exceeded its planned activity. And home care to provide additional capacity, and care homes in terms of providing improvement response teams. The money, as set out in the report, has been allocated to a whole range of schemes which, have helped significantly for this financial year. I do think there is an issue for future years because the core funding of the Better Care Fund we anticipate being rolled over. This 19.25 million at the moment, we do not know. So, there is an issue there that we will have to address. We can't be reliant on non-recurrent funding, so we are having to address things in another way.
So this 19.25 million doesn't address the additional costs around the social care reforms, the assessments and such like. So in that case, what is the gap in terms of the finances that we anticipate for the social care reforms between this year and future years? Because as I see it, both the cap and the need to assess individual clients will create significant extra costs for the County Council, and that is the figure I'm looking for.
We are working on assessments of what those demands. You're quite right, there will be significant extra demand on the number of people assessing and that cost of care. There are 6 pilot sites. I do believe they're up and running at the moment. 5. There are 5 pilot sites. And I think from that we will actually start to learn what the impact will be. Certainly, one of the things that we intend doing is writing to the Minister because there is a real danger that the costs will exceed the amount of money from central government. I think if social care receives the proportion of the national insurance increase that we hope, then that may well be sufficient. But I think there are concerns that we don't know exactly what funding, additional funding we are going to get out of that 3.4 billion additional taxation. It is key that this is properly funded. There is no slack in the system at the moment, so additional costs will have to be met by additional funding from central government. The exact figure at the moment we're not able to say, but that work is being modelled by Richard Harling and his team and Rob Salmon. Thank you, Chairman.
A year away from the reforms, it's a bit worrying that there could be a significant gap. When do you think we might have those sort of figures available?
So, Chair, we're currently modelling the figures locally, and I know that a lot of work is also going on by people such as the County Council's Network and the LGA. Modelling is very complex and is hampered by the fact that we have quite limited data available. The assumptions about the total cost are critically dependent on things like the number of self-funders and also the level of capital assets of self-funders. And as you can imagine, we simply don't know how much self-funders have in the bank. We've never asked them, and even if we had, they wouldn't tell us because they're private citizens. So we're having to make all sorts of assumptions about that, which does complicate it. We expect that by sort of mid to late summer, we should have a closer range of estimates, but I would also hope that the government has done its own calculations and other bodies such as the CCN and the LGA would have results that we can compare and contrast.
Is that okay, Councillor Atkins? Councillor Pert.
To work out how to use the system again. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Can I start off just where the leader started by paying tribute to the work that is going on supporting those Ukrainian refugees coming into the county, because I think it's a very good demonstration post-COVID of that partnership working between multiple stakeholders to make that journey as I was going to say simple and easy. It isn't simple or easy, but as safe as possible at least. And seeing it from the other side of the fence, I do pay tribute to the work the county is leading on in doing so. I don't want it to become a love-in, but I also welcome the clarity in this report. And I think some of the tables and indices are much easier to see where performance is. However, I'm just going to go into little bits of detail because I actually think that there is an opportunity to further improve what sits here. And I always believe that a chart should tell a story. And if it isn't easy to see what the story is, then there's an opportunity just to refine it and hone it and work further on it. And I'll give a few examples. I could go on for a long while, but I don't intend to because I think the point will be made, and hopefully we could take the detail outside of this discussion because in the end we want to be scrutinising performance, not the tables, if that makes any sense. So if I can give some examples, Chair. The first example I'd give is on page 9, where it shows a red, amber and green rating. Brilliant. But actually, I don't need someone to tell me that an amber is an amber. And actually, it'd be really good if someone told me what the trend was with that colour. Because what that really indicates is whether that's an immediate priority or an immediate problem or an ongoing problem. And it just really helps the reader understand what the trend looks like. And I'm not trying to be rude, because I actually think that the paper is really good. And please don't take anything away from that. If I then move to Appendix 1, and I could go through all of these just about and say, actually, if there isn't a second axis on these, we're really missing an opportunity because actually things aren't normally one-dimensional. Usually there are 2 or 3 factors at play within most of the things that are going on, which is why they're complex and not simple to apply a fix to. So, for example, if I just take sort of the simplest one, the one on page 27 where it shows the number of Category 3 safety defects, I don't want to talk about the defects, I want to talk about the chart. Showing the number that come through each month isn't hugely relevant if we don't know how many are being fixed or what the backlog is. So I actually think a secondary axis, and there's room on the chart for a secondary axis, would actually really tell what that story is. Is it an improving position or a position that is stable or getting worse? And I think the charts are really good, but they don't tell the full story. I'll give you another example, the Supporting Families programme. I actually think there is a mixed axis on that. You show a figure, a dotted line which runs straight through the year, which is the annual target, but you're comparing it with the quarterly performance. So I actually think that there is a whole range of things in these charts that, with a bit of scrutiny and a bit of, sort of backwardsing and forwardsing on, actually could improve the quality of the data that's here, notwithstanding that this is, in my view, a really useful report, but it could go to the next level if you wanted it to. I've got a couple of other points I'd like to make, but I'm going to rest with that point if I can, Chair, and come back once others had an opportunity to input.
Okay, we've got a couple of the speakers. Would you like to respond to that, Councillor White?
Yes, so Kerry and I and John Tradewell spend quite a bit of time thinking about how we make this as easy to digest as possible, and so we present data that people can find usable. So we'll take Councillor Pert's points, and maybe Councillor Pert, if you could speak to Kerry afterwards and just go into further detail. Clearly, there is a compromise to be struck here to present data in a way that's easy to understand but doesn't become overcomplicated, so that a less sophisticated reader than yourself, Councillor Pert, can also understand it as well. There we go.
Happy with that, Councillor Pert?
Delighted, happy to contact Kerry after the meeting.
Okay, next to speak is Councillor Bernard Peters.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm looking at paragraph 11 in the document where it talks about developing a long-term model for voluntary sector provision. I think I've seen that in a couple of sets of notes from previous meetings. How are you corralling and harnessing the wonderful support that we saw during the pandemic from the voluntary sector? And how confident are you that there are enough volunteers out there? Because we know volunteers are spread fairly thinly. And from the work that I've been doing at the Borough Council, a lot of volunteers seem to be as old as I am. And they won't last forever. So are you particularly looking at perhaps motivating younger people to be volunteers? So I'd like a feel for what you're doing on the voluntary sector, because they're undoubtedly going to have a major part to play.
Is that Councillor Jessel?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll pick up on some of those points because with my health and care hat on, I'm doing quite a significant amount of work with Councillor Wilson in terms of the Supporting Communities programme. You're absolutely quite right, Councillor Peters, that there is always churn in all organisations, whether voluntary or otherwise. And one of the things that we're looking to do is to support voluntary organisations to equip them with the skills to actually recruit new recruits. Some of those people can be people who they've helped, who then want to go on to help others. So we do need to make sure that we support voluntary groups throughout the county to continuously recruit new people. One of the projects that we're doing, which Councillor Peters is probably well aware of, is working very closely with the East Staffordshire Primary Care Network to set a project that actually has started to launch. The PCN have recruited staff now to do what's called social prescribing, which is actually people who come with levels of anxiety, minor depression. Instead of giving them medications, actually not just signposting them, but helping them to interact with voluntary groups to actually give them that community link. And often it's to prevent or stop the social isolation that many people have got into over the last 2 years. So we're working with the local GPs. It should have benefits to the local population. It's helping to support the voluntary sector. The software that's being utilised, which is called the Joy app, will actually give us feedback as to where there is a shortage in supply of voluntary sector capacity, which is really important for planning for the future. So those are the kinds of things we're doing. In discussions only just last week, one of the things that is happening in Derbyshire is that they've got a volunteer passport. So somebody may volunteer with a particular group and for some reason it doesn't work out, it's not quite what they're looking for. But if they've been through all those relevant checks, they can have a passport so that they can go to work for another voluntary sector without having to start from scratch. So we're trying to facilitate people being able to volunteer across a number of sectors, but you're absolutely right, we are working to increase the capacity of the voluntary sector. I always say volunteering helps other people, but it leaves you with a really warm feeling inside yourself as a volunteer, and it's a crucial part of what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Yes, by all means.
Thank you, Councillor Jessel. I feel reassured by that. Could you just tell me, you know, in Staffordshire we have a very diverse community, but are you confident that the reach gets to people who maybe English isn't their first language? Are you getting to those people in terms of giving them the opportunity to volunteer and support their own communities?
I can't guarantee that. I know there are volunteer groups, as you and I know, there are 23 different languages spoken by the population in Burton-on-Trent. I'm sure there are probably certain sectors of the community which we need to make more effort. And I think it's by supporting the ongoing development of voluntary groups and new groups who come forward. I'm sure there will be groups that come forward to support new Ukrainian residents because they certainly will need support groups to help them integrate into our society. So I can't guarantee that, but what I am certain are there are systems in place that where we can start to identify the gaps, and it's those gaps I think to which you're referring.
Eye on that for us, please, because as you say, the gaps, people that fall through those gaps find it awfully difficult to clamber out again. Thank you.
Okay, the comments from Councillor Peters have sparked a bit of response from the Cabinet. I've got Councillor DeVille and then Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I think Mr Peters raises a really, really good point, Chairman. I think the one thing, Bernard, that was really positive as a result of probably the worst time that we've passed through within our lifetime, the one positive was that tremendous community spirit, wasn't it? And I've said on many, many occasions, I wish we could bottle that and move forward with that spirit. And I think that, Mr Peters, is one of our key objectives. So moving forward with that community spirit, I think key to that is our partnership working. And by partnership working, I mean a direct working partnership with our districts, with our parish councils, with people like Nexus Care, who are helping tremendously with the really complex issues we have within health within Staffordshire at the moment. And I think that you asked the question about reach. Is the reach to these these superb voluntary organisations sufficient? I don't know. But what I do know is that it's absolutely at the top of our objectives list, Mr Peters, to continue these partnerships, these key partnerships moving forward, because that's the way to deliver our services at a local level in the future by working even closer with districts and parish councils. And I really have to say, and I hope you'd agree, colleagues, because I know you're deeply involved with your local communities, I think that our relationships with districts and parish councils and our other partners are better now than they've ever been. Is there more to do? There certainly is. But I think, Mr Peters, you can rest assured that we're all, not as a cabinet, as a council, we're all doing everything that we can to enhance these partnerships moving forward. And I think the partnership working is key to bottling that great spirit and moving forward with it.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. Over the years, I sort of learnt a useful lesson about the voluntary sector in a particular community. In the village I lived in for 10 years, the voluntary sector consisted of about the same 20 people. If you got a Venn diagram, you'd have 8 of them were on the parish council, 8 of them were on the Parent-Teacher Association, 8 of them were on the Village Hall Committee, and in the middle where it overlapped, you'd have 3 or 4 people all doing the same thing, tended to be retired people working their socks off to try and help out. And when I was a district councillor in the early 2000s, I remember suggesting perhaps that we could get the elderly, because at that time I was still in my 30s, young and dynamic and vigorous, get the elderly people to do more in their communities. To which one of the older members of the council retorted, hang on a second, I provide free childminding services, and without me, the childcare situation in Lichfield will fall through the floor. And they were quite right. I think we also have to be mindful when we're thinking about how the voluntary sector can be augmented and do more, is that quite a lot of people are quietly getting on with volunteering just by helping their family and helping their neighbours in a way that goes unappreciated and unnoticed. We did, during the COVID pandemic, as Councillor DeVille referred to, we did become more community aware, but that just also flagged up that people were already doing an awful lot for each other that just went unnoticed. So when we're thinking about how we add to this, we have to do it in a slightly sophisticated way and not make assumptions about how we think people lead their lives. I'd like to bring Kerry in just to talk about the new Vcse contract, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor White. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a further key way that the County Council is supporting the sector is through our Vcse capacity building framework. That's been in place for over 6 years now. We're currently re-tendering that framework for a minimum of a further 3 years. And that is the County Council providing vital support to our infrastructure organisations to make sure that we're supporting the sector to remain sustainable. They, like us, have been affected by COVID. A lot of support is going to local community organisations to help them recover, as well as hopefully grow and further build on the good work that they're doing in our communities. Through that framework, we have regular conversations about the challenges around volunteering and what more we can do working with the sector to encourage further volunteering. On Councillor Peters' point around e-staffs, building on what Councillor Jessel has said, there's also work going on in Burton around a community champions network, which again very much builds on the learning from COVID and the real positive response that we had from the community in Burton around the challenges of COVID. So there are a lot of initiatives underway, and we're making sure we're continuing to support the sector in the most appropriate way. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, next to indicate is Councillor Bob Spencer.
Chair, thank you. Actually, the point I was going to make really was about the performance dashboard, but I think we've probably moved on from that. I would just reinforce the points that were made. I think things like, for example, using rolling averages tends not to be a particularly sensitive way of measuring a longitudinal study of anything, because there are 2 variables, of course, the month that falls off at the back end and the month that comes on at the front. The other point that I would make as well is that if these are performance indicators over a shortish period of time, i.e. quarters, then simple graphs I don't think are sophisticated enough. Not that we want to make it over sophisticated, to recognise some of those issues and what changes the performance. I notice in the report, which again I would agree with what's been said previously, is an excellent report. But we have suggestions as to why things are or aren't working that tend to be provided by the providers of those services. And we shouldn't forget that the providers will probably know the reasons why things do or don't work. But I think if we put all of our eggs in that basket and don't have a process whereby we can see performance change at least on a quarterly basis, then we won't be able to move forward with that. The other thing I would add is that there are plenty of industry standard measures that are now used. Statistical process control charts, for example, is one of those. And the other point I would make is that they are being used by a lot of our partner agencies. So we ought to be using something similar along those lines. The other point I would make very quickly about volunteering, and I was really encouraged to hear what you're saying about that support, and also what Councillor DeVille was saying about supporting both the district and parish councils. I have seen certainly in my own area and next door in Womben boasting sort of 70 and 80 volunteering groups, and some parts of the areas that I cover there aren't any at all. And I do think that sometimes the issues around parish councils might be a hindrance and a blockage to some of that. So I do think it's about support, but I also think it's about working with those parish councils to make that work, because there is an army of people there that we have, or certainly in parts of South Staffs, we're failing to harness some of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. You ready to answer?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Councillor Spencer to clarify what he meant by hindrances around some parish councils. Is that a suggestion that sometimes the parish councils are... You might need to turn yours off. There we go. Is that a suggestion that sometimes the parish councils perhaps aren't facilitating the development of community groups in their area?
I think you hinted at it when you were talking earlier about various areas, and there is a great deal of pride, and quite rightly so, that local parish councillors have in facilitating various services in their areas. Sometimes, from my experience, and this might not be everyone's experience, that's at the exclusion of potentially other people. And I, for whatever reason, we could discuss it all day, I'm sure, but I do think if there was the right support there, both from a council perspective and some form of potentially financial support as well, then that would make life a lot easier. I simply reflect, why does my next door neighbour have 80 and can boast 80 volunteering organisations, and in certain parts of the area that I cover there aren't any at all.
Next to speak is Councillor Tina Clements.
I need longer arms. I welcome the report. Just a few things, if I may, Chair. Yesterday I was having lunch with the Education Secretary in London, and he mentioned about T-level qualifications taking over from BTEC qualifications and being a better qualification. I just wonder how we feel this will affect our skills agenda here in Staffordshire, and what effect it's going to have on Staffordshire learners, if any, and whether we've even got them here in Staffordshire yet within our colleges and sixth forms. Biggest thing on this agenda, other than highways, which I'm not going to go into because David will get upset. Mental health, coming out of COVID, obviously we've got more youngsters that are now struggling with their mental health. Unfortunately, Tamworth had a death on the train track last week, somebody struggling with mental health. And I think for me, I need to be reassured on what this county council is doing to support people in mental crisis going forwards, because, you know, we're seeing people all the time, and I think everybody's probably got an example that they can give. So in Anne's absence, I'm champion mental health, and I think as a mental health champion for Tamworth Borough Council, I need to be reassured that we are doing everything we possibly can. And then the only other thing was about the connectivity, the faster broadband. What's this council going to be doing to make sure we connect with the 4% of Staffordshire residents, which is sounds a small proportion, but it's actually quite a big number, and how we're going to get them onto the faster broadband. And then household waste recycling centres, what progress have we made, and have we got an update on how that's working, Mark?
Thank you, Councillor Clements. I think you covered just about everything there, apart from highways. Who would like to? Who would like to deal with the subject of BTEC learners, mental health, crisis management, broadband, and waste?
I can't answer the question about whether or not T levels have been implemented across the county yet. I know that certainly a number of FE colleges are looking to do a T level intake in September. I don't know if there's any in particular in Staffordshire. It would be a strange Secretary of State who proposes the replacement of one qualification with another and say, well, it's worse. So I'm pretty sure that he would be saying it is a better outcome. Going to mental health and the very serious issue of mental health, there are an array of primary pieces of primary legislation coming through, which may or may not go some way to tackle some of the issues that we have to do with mental health. The online harms bill intrigues me, I have to say. It looks like it could help the problem to an extent, particularly around bullying online and other nefarious activities that take place online. But I'm not sure necessarily that it will, because the very nature of social media is constantly evolving, and it's quite difficult to foresee how you could deal with that. And in any case, who is the arbiter of what I can or can't say? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be Connor? Who's going to say what I can and can't say online? And that's where I'm struggling with the whole concept of it. But mental health is a challenge which remains one that it's growing, and we don't seem to be able to actually get a grip of it in any meaningful sense. As you recall, some time ago, there was a concept known as the parity of esteem, where the NHS said, look, physical health and mental health should get equal treatment. It's clear that when you look across the county of Stafford, and we can only speak for that one, parity of esteem is a million miles away. If you're looking at, in the children's services, the number of children who are needing children and adolescent mental health services provision, and indeed, as far as going forward for Tier 4 beds, those children who are in dire need of mental health support because their mental health has completely collapsed, it is a struggle. I know that Councillor Pert continues a vigilant watch on the mental health provision across the county through his committee, but it's something that I can't smile at this point in any way, shape or form. It's an area where there is a gap, and we need to continue to press the NHS locally to improve that. But we can also do something ourselves. We have Anne Edgeler as our mental health champion. She flies the flag at every possible opportunity, reminding us all of the need to address people's mental health conditions. We have mental health first aiders across the county. Are they as good as they could be? I'm not saying that individuals concerned aren't. What I am suggesting is that it's only just scratching the surface of a bow wave of mental health problems that we have in society at the moment. So I have no good answers to you there. But one way we can also tackle mental health is to address things like loneliness and isolation. So where we can make progress, as Councillor Jessel referred to, and Kerry through the Vcse contract, we do what we can to help people be less lonely and less isolated, because that improves people's mental health. Parks and open spaces with the districts and boroughs, getting out into a green space and going for a walk, making sure that the provision is there across the county through the districts and boroughs, that's a good thing to do as well. So there are tools available that we are working with others to deliver, which will help address people's mental health problems. But I'm afraid to say that there is no medical cure for this. There's just a range of options available to us. Your other one was household waste recycling centres, and I'd like to defer to Councillor DeVille to address that one, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Mr. White is entirely right about the issues around mental health. More important than ever, isn't it now? Deepest sympathy about the incident in Tamworth. I suffered similar incident with a young man who worked for me in Stone quite recently. So it's really at the top of my head, my agenda. It's more difficult now than ever. I think people are suffering with mental health issues more following the pandemic than ever. And Mr. White is also right in saying that we've all got a part to play here. We take it very seriously at county, as do our district councils. I think that everything that we do, and we have a very large agenda at Staffordshire Moorlands, don't we, for getting people out and just enjoying the fresh air, enjoying the beautiful countryside, enjoying the fresh air, and encouraging people to talk to each other. But, Councillor Clements, it's so complex, and I think such a serious problem at the moment. And again, it's something that we'll get through by working in partnership, again, with local groups, with district councils, with advice groups. But it's a dreadful situation, and again, is something that's at the absolute top of our agenda, because it's a wicked problem at the moment, isn't it? Not going to touch on highways other than to say that the Highways Transformation Programme, which I'm not going to steal any thunder, David, don't worry. The transformation programme is going very, very well. You as local members and the general public spoke very loudly and said that we need more control around the highways operation. We need more focus on customer quality, on getting things right first time. I'm not going to expand any more, David. Members also suggested that we needed more control around the other massively customer-facing service, which is the household waste recycling sites. So back in March, that transition happened. If I may, Chairman, just take this opportunity of thanking our officers who worked tirelessly on that. You know, we had a number of changes and phases in the running of our waste sites, where we moved over and Amy ran the service for 12 months following Vcse. And now we decided, having gone through scrutiny, having spoken to all local members and members of the public, more importantly, that we wanted more control, and we brought them in-house at the end of March. The initial transition has been very, very successful. I, as Cabinet member, have had to not micromanage, but certainly dip into the detail of these things, and I've visited the sites when we first switched over to in-house provision of service. And firstly, I'd say that the decision is absolutely right to bring it in-house. It does give us greater control, it does make us a bit more fleet of foot to change things, and it makes us more flexible. I think the most important thing is that the change and bringing it in-house has been warmly welcomed by our staff, who actually face up to customers and face the issues that people have. And it's a massively customer-facing facility, as you know, Tina. Our staff welcome the change, and I think that's really important, because to make this work, it won't be the facilities or the JCB diggers that we have on site that make it work, it'll be our people. So it has been warmly welcomed by our employees. It's been warmly welcomed by members of the public. Have we got more to do? Yes, there's much more to do, but it's improvement, again, on customer focus, on customer service, but it's an evolving work that we're going to be doing from now on. And I think we're bringing an update report to Cabinet in either June or July. And I think it's also a good idea, Chairman, that we bring regular updates to this committee, and indeed the other scrutiny committees as well. So certainly, Councillor Clements, so far so good, and it's been very, very warmly received.
You happy with all that, Councillor Clements? Next is Councillor Conor Warman.
Let's go for it. I think I'm on. Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to touch on two issues, really. The first is around special educational needs and disabilities, and I'm thankful for the graphs. I echo what Jeremy and Bob have said about them, but they do give a good overview as to what is going on. And one of those issues that you can clearly see is the percentage of education, health and care plans issued in time each month has dropped from probably 90% in Feb 2021 to 30% in February 2022. And that, by any stretch, is quite a significant drop in performance and below the national benchmark. I know that we've had problems with SEND provision and we've had a recent Ofsted, but I did think that our service perhaps would be showing some signs of improvement, and that specific piece of data, no doubt there's a lot of different metrics that go on this, but that specific piece of data is worrying for me. I'm just wondering whether what we've got in place to address that over the next 3 to 6 months. And I have another question, Chair, but if I could have the answer to that one first.
Would you take that one first then?
Thank you, Councillor Wildman. Yes, absolutely, there is a clear decline on that graph, isn't there? And we have included some narrative in the report to go into a bit more depth around that. Talking to the service area, their analysis is it's very much linked to securing key workers following the changes due to the broader children's service transformation. So to address this and also the overall increase that we're seeing in demand for EHCPs, which is obviously not just a Staffordshire issue but a national issue as well, we have done some specific recruitment around SEND key workers, and so we've been able to increase the SEND key worker FTE from 28 to 35, which also helps give us less resilience on agency staff. Those new key worker roles have been recruited. However, as I'm sure you can appreciate, not all of them have started yet with the kind of notice periods for some of them. Therefore, we haven't quite got all of those new key workers in place to start addressing the timeliness issues. Therefore, we are confident that once those key workers are in place, that metric will start to improve. We've also, obviously, as part of the recent Ofsted inspection, agreed an accelerated progress plan that's been developed and improved by the DFE, and that also has got a real focus on improving timeliness as well. Thank you.
Tom, you got a second question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Can I just, through you, ask Bob if we're following the SEND, it's not a transformation project, is it? It's almost an action plan to improve services. Are we doing anything to kind of follow up on that? Because I am quite concerned. It's been going on now for a number of years. And I think maybe a year ago we did say, because Ofsted were coming in, they would do an assessment and so on, and then we would review it at that stage. And I'm not sure we have reviewed it, but Bob, you may know more than I do. Sorry, I'm going off, but I think
There might be a role for audit and standards here, but I'll let Councillor Spencer speak.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Just put me on the spot there. I think one of the issues following the latest Ofsted, of course, and we should recognise the fact, I think it was it 6 out of 8 of the issues that were looked at by Ofsted were found to be acceptable, good, here in Staffordshire. And when you compared that, I may be making the figures up, so please don't quote, I'm not quoting these figures, but I understand other local authorities, certainly in the Black Country, were passing 1 in 15 or something. So the picture here was much improved. The 2 issues that are outstanding, one of those was about the health and care plans that you've already raised, and I think that there is an action plan, and certainly the presentations that have been made to my committee are encouraging in that respect. The other one was something called co-production, which is about how do you deal with these issues with other agencies. And co-production is one of these things that just seems to have appeared over the last couple of years as a phrase that encompasses the way that we move forward with not, as far as I can tell, not a great deal of understanding nationally about how that's driven forward. Other than, so I think in answer to the question, we are much improved. The 2 areas that we need to work on, I believe from what I've heard at the committees, are being particularly well managed. The one about co-production, I think nationally people are struggling with some of that, but I think we're in a good place to be able to do that. The other thing that, if I could take this opportunity also about health and care plans, just to add on to the point that was made there, when I speak to the local head teachers at the schools in my area, one of their concerns about these plans is not only the fact that they're not meeting the timescale, but head teachers and schools have to make financial decisions before the decision comes through, which creates frustration and difficulties. I just wonder if there was any work being done with local schools just to explain that process, because they're making decisions in the dark. Thank you.
Just before I bring in Councillor White, Julie's identified that the Audit and Standards Committee has agreed a 6-monthly review of the SEND process and the Assisted Inclusion Partnership Group. Just point that out. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to Councillor Spencer's point about the funding of this SEND provision, SEND budgets across the country are overspent. In some places it's hugely dramatic, and whilst ours isn't hugely dramatic, it is overspent. You may be aware of the school's white paper that is coming through. It be announced in the Queen's speech this morning. There are areas within the school's white paper which may go to address some of the issues we have around EHCPs, but they may also have some unintended consequences which we'll have to tussle with. There are 4 provisions in the school's white paper: an excellent teacher for every child, delivering high standards of curriculum, behaviour and attendance, targeted support for every child that needs it, and that's the bit I just want to dwell on momentarily, and then a stronger, fairer school system. When we're talking about the targeted support for every child that needs it, it is about keeping SEND children in the mainstream, which I think by and of itself is a good thing. SEND children, when I was at school, stayed in the mainstream. Very few SEND children left to go to what we called in those days special school. But in order to do that, it needs to be adequately funded. The Local Government Association's response to the school's white paper is, quotes, "With sufficient funding and powers, local authorities are ideally placed to act as the middle tier between central government and schools." Fine. But it's the bit that says sufficient funding. We need to be careful that this isn't done with the idea that local authorities can do it with no money whatsoever, or just miracle up solutions without any support. I think the other component that's quite important in the school's white paper is the endeavour to end off-rolling at the rate at which it's going on at the moment. That is to say, those children who are difficult to deal with, and the head teacher just goes, you know what, best off being educated at home. It's not best off, the child's not best off being educated at home. The child's best off being educated at school with the right support around them. So I welcome that. I think that's a really good step in the right direction. But that will also require, and these are the sort of unintended consequences that are related to this, a change in the way Ofsted views the assessment of schools. So to just look at the sort of top line results and say, well, your results aren't as good as they should be, and then the head teacher retorts, well, I've got quite a few SEND children within the academy, because it's all going to be academies. If Ofsted said, well, I don't really care about that, your results are your results, then it needs to have a far more sophisticated approach to the way Ofsted deals with those inspections. So lots of moving parts on that one, and potentially some unintended consequences that I think the Scrutiny Committee, particularly Councillor Spencer, will be well placed to keep an eye on as it emerges.
Okay, we have some indications of people want to speak a second time. Councillors Atkins, Pert and Spencer in that order. I just wanted to cover a couple of admin-y type things which I think are worth highlighting in the report that might need a bit of attention. If you look at page 29 of the report, or page 31 of the PDF, that's the one with the table that shows the overall spend, if you've got that particular one. On paragraph 3, where it refers to the remaining grant shortfall, I think that should be unbracketed, that figure of 2.049. It's a balancing figure. You take all the figures away from the 16.2, it should be a positive. And the other thing which I found a bit glaring was that there's a few references. I found one on page 13 of the report, or page 15 of the PDF, referring to Power BI. And I thought that was a new policy that the council had launched without telling me. Apparently it's Microsoft, it's a platform that allows business intelligence. So I think in terms of shorthand, if that can be explained, what Power BI is all about. Okay, having said that, I'll go on to Councillor Atkins next.
Yeah, first of all, just a comment. I welcome the warm words about mental health and access to nature and everything else, but I have to say that it is just warm words when, you know, the County Council is overseeing the closure of a nature-based mental health project just outside Leek on 12 acres of County Council land, which is effectively being closed down at a time when we've never needed it more. But anyway, moving on to the question I was going to ask. Paragraph 12 on page 12 talks about the level of client debt is above target and work is ongoing to recover this. My concern is that we're heading, sorry, not heading, we are in a cost of living crisis. We are going to have a situation where people have not got enough money to heat and eat. And therefore, I want to know what the County Council's policy is in terms of recovering debt in a circumstance where people are going to be in dire need. If they're not in dire need now, according to the horrendous forecast for the end of the year, they will be in dire need by the end of the year. So what is the County Council going to be doing in terms of recovering debt? Because it seems to me that we have a responsibility to people on low income or in other circumstances unable to pay debt, that we are considerate in terms of the way we recover it.
Councillor White?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could just turn to Dr. Harling for the technicalities on client debt recovery, because that's the component that you were referring to.
Thank you, Chair. So just to set the scene, client debt sometimes arises when people are due to pay a charge for their adult social services but fail to do so. We do pursue those individuals. We try to pursue them compassionately. Nevertheless, this is money that is owed to the County Council and therefore to taxpayers, and without that money we are unable to fund other endeavours. So it is important that we do recover those charges where they are properly due, and as I say, we try to do so compassionately, but we do need the funding to pay for other things that people value.
Okay, Councillor Atkins. Councillor Pertz.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to set the record straight for Councillor Clements, T-levels are indeed being delivered in Staffordshire, actually in the county town in Stafford and Newcastle, and I'm delighted to say that Newcastle and Stafford Colleges group have been delivering T-levels since the beginning of the academic year. So not only are they an upper decile educational provider, not only are they outstanding, not only are they currently building a new innovation and skills hub costing £28 million in the county town, but they are also going to be opening in the summer of 2024 an Institute of Technology, Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent's Institute of Technology in the county town, and I would welcome any conversation that the member would like to have on any of those elements. And equally, it's something that we as a county council should be shouting about, because it is all about a skills agenda that is critical given the loss of educational provision for a number of years due to the pandemic, notwithstanding the brilliant endeavours of our teachers. That, however, wasn't the point I was going to make. I was going to focus in on paragraph 26, if I could, please, on page 17 of the PDF. This is an area of significant concern for me, given that the existing provision in place for survivors of domestic abuse is at risk of being destabilised for the long term and through potentially an underappreciation of the importance of refuge in the keeping of women safe and their families safe. The salient question I have is, will the provision be delivered in line with, as a minimum, the Domestic Abuse Act 2021? The bill says that the bill says that it will strengthen the support for victims of abuse by statutory agencies and place a duty on local authorities in England to provide accommodation-based support to victims of domestic abuse and their children in refuge and other safe accommodation. And my question is, as I say, will that provision be delivered as a minimum? And the substance behind that is, first of all, how is the County Council going to ensure that this doesn't adversely impact the duty? And is there more work that is going to be done between the borough councils and district councils' statutory homeless duty, the pathways, and to make sure robust and resettlement services are included as a holistic approach, not as piecemeal elements? I.e., just lining up services together against each other isn't delivering a holistic end-to-end service for the victims of domestic abuse. And second of all, many of the current providers of safe accommodation across the county not only provide refuge and dispersed accommodation, they also have strong community links and provide countless benefits and value to the communities they serve. In the commissioning of safe accommodation, how will we ensure these additional benefits can continue to be realised with whatever the provision going forwards looks like? Thank you.
Councillor Wyatt?
Fortunately, Kerry was typing furiously as the questions were coming in. I don't have the answer to those questions at the moment, Councillor Pert, so if you could allow us, we will get back to you with an answer in due course.
Perfectly reasonable. Can I write write to you on that and get a written response? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Spencer.
Sorry, Chair, I asked the question I wanted to at the end of describing the safeguarding. Thank you.
Can I ask a question then myself on digital exclusion or inclusion, whichever you want to look at it? This is page 20, paragraph 55. It refers to the fact that we're working with organisations to try and reach those people that might be excluded. And the question really is, how have we selected those organisations? How do we endeavour to make sure that we're reaching the hard to reach? I think it was a question Councillor Peters asked earlier about English not first spoken language. How do we contact people that we know have got problems, but we don't know where they are?
Yeah, that's the old Rumsfeldian question, isn't it? I can't give you an answer to that directly, but we do... Did you have a... Yeah, I'll hand over to Kerry. She seems to know.
If I could ask the question in a different way, how do we select the organisations to work with is probably more sensible.
Thank you, Chairman. And this is where our existing Vcse capacity building framework comes into its own, because we're utilising our existing partnership with those infrastructure organisations, those key ones across the county, to help us to reach into those smaller community groups and make sure that we are targeting the Donate It scheme where it needs it most. We're also strongly supporting, obviously, the Ukraine incident management team, and again making sure that we are working with partners who are supporting those Ukraine refugees to see if again we can provide them with tech and kit to enable them to make sure they're not digitally excluded as well. So we're using predominantly our infrastructure organisations to help make the connections to those community groups most in need and who know the patch better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nobody's directly asked a question about highways, even though Councillor DeVille's tried to give an answer referring to the restructure. I just wondered whether, on behalf of the Cabinet, Councillor Williams or anybody else would like to say whether the restructure is going to affect the trend, because although we've got the chart that shows the number of Category 3 calls that are identified, it doesn't necessarily show the trend of how that might be improving or otherwise, and I wonder whether that transformation might improve on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I have every confidence. In fact, it will affect the trend with the fact that we are looking to and have already brought in our inspectors back in house now. So those people have been tupied over and are working with the community teams at a higher rate than previously. They're also now out working with the teams, so that they're encouraging them to ensure that the quality of work is maintained. As you know, with the transformation programme, we are looking at the fact that we are looking to, with the investment that we're doing, despite the challenges from government funding, despite that, this cabinet is investing 15.5 million into highways, and as part of that, to make sure that we address the shortfall on the statutory obligations, we're putting money into the projects that we've done previously, such as the extra gully team that made a huge difference around the county, and it was noticed not only by members but by members of the public as well. And we're looking at doing that to ensure and address some of our major issues that we've had ongoing for a while with the money that we've got. We are also aware that we have financial implications with the increasing costs that have gone on recently, especially with the price of tarmac. But saying that, and from other visits that I've had myself quite recently, we are working to address as many issues as we can. And Councillor DeVille was quite right in the fact that we are introducing a scheme. It's the trial scheme. This is part of the start of a journey, and from a trial scheme of making sure we do right first time. So where there is a category 2 or 1 pothole that gets mended, cat 3 and cat 2 defects around that in an area will also be addressed and rectified. This should ensure that we both, firstly, we get more done, and we are hoping to do about 9,000 more potholes this year than we were doing last year, but also the fact that it's done in an area where people see it. And it addresses the issue that people say, you've done one but left 3 or 4 by it. That's what we're trying to do. That's just part of the transformation, and as part of that, as I've said it previously in scrutiny meetings, we're bringing our staff with us. We're keeping them informed. We're wanting them to transform with us. And as such, I seem to be getting that message when I'm out there. So overall, yes, the question is yes. I think it will make a massive difference. Thank you.
The answer is yes, and we now have 4 more speakers, including Councillor DeVille, put down as a 5th speaker. The first one to speak is Councillor Wyman.
Thank you very much. I don't want to make David repeat all of that because there's no real point, but latest figures, 69% Cat 2 repaired in time, 39% Cat 3. We've just had the email that you've just sent through. What I think we need to have in this table is the Cat 3 defects repaired in time. I shan't be like a barrister and say I'll put it to you that you've left it out, but I mean, it needs to be in there so that we can track performance. That's the only point I've got to make. Thank you.
I take your point about the Cat 3 defects, but unfortunately there isn't a time frame on them. They get looked at, and they've got around 6 months. But obviously, due to the pressures that we've had previously, we haven't been able to address our Cat 3s as much as we want to. That's why the change to the right first time will address that in areas, so that I'm more than convinced and confident that we will address a lot more Cat 3s because we'll be doing the Cat 2s and Cat 1s in that area.
The impression that it was 6 months, and no one's told me otherwise, none of my highways team, and I go on to them and I say to them, we've got past the 6 month threshold, can we escalate? Because that's what I say, and I don't know whether I'm the only one or whether I've completely misinterpreted all of that, but it seems to me that we've slipped from a 6 month time frame to an open-ended time frame, which I'm completely, I'm very unhappy with as a local member. Can we bring in the 6 month time frame? Thank you.
As I said, the problem that we've had previously is that we haven't had the transformation of what we're trying to do. So the 6 month time frame is in place, but up till now we haven't been able to attain that just due to the sheer pressures and numbers and volume that we've had around the area. Remembering that every time we go through a winter period, we get a huge amount of defects. There's nothing we can do about that. That's exactly what happens with the weather and with the way that water is diverted underneath the ground, which causes the potholes in the first place. So it is a matter of that we are trying to get as many of the Cat 3s done within the 6 months, but up to now we haven't been able to do that. But I'm hoping that by the right first time and this extra investment, especially where it comes into the entrances into the towns and villages, that will address a lot more of these Cat 3s. But I think we have to also look at a real management of expectation in the fact that we haven't got a huge amount of funding. We've made a massive investment, which is a prudent investment, but it's the maximum amount of investment that we could do, as this cabinet could do at this time. And the pressures that are on there from the outside, such as the increases in materials, is going to affect that. There's no way around that, but we are trying to address that as best as we can, and I actually think there's a real positive that we're trying to do. But I'll take your points on board, and we do try to manage it within the 6 months.
Next to speak is Councillor Samantha Thompson.
Thank you. You've addressed the situation with the cost of materials and the 15.5 million. To me, that was a concern because you're paying out more on materials, so you're losing that money, so it's not in fact filling those potholes. My other concern is, you know, when they do emergency potholes and then they come back to refill them, is it not sensible, I mean, this is just me being me, to do them correctly in the first place rather than fill them twice, because you're costing tarmac twice then, aren't you? You're putting tarmac into emergency, then you're coming back to do them again to do them correctly, so you're doubling the cost in that way, aren't you? So to me, the common sense is to do it correctly then and there. That's just me. And also, sorry, I'm going back to the 6 months time frame with the cat 3. Do they get rechecked as often as they should do? Because I always find my cat 3 ones worsen over time, so they end up becoming cat 2 and cat 1. So to me, the sensible option, and I'm just a layman's looking at it that way, is to repair it when you can, so it doesn't get to cat 2 or cat 3. Because that's when it is a problem. That's when you get your insurance claims going in, because they're hitting the potholes and the tyres are bursting and they want their money back then. So to me, that's just my way of looking at it. Sorry, David.
No,
I've
you're
got
right.
4 more speakers. Are you happy to take these one at a time?
Absolutely. So, looking at it, doing it correctly, actually, and this is we could actually probably temporarily fill potholes 50 times for the same price as it cost to do it properly once. Emergency potholes are done within the 2-hour time frame, just for that simple thing, and especially when it's done at night, where they're filled just to ensure that the vehicles don't go down and get damaged, and then they come back to refill them. From what we're changing with the transformation programme, that refill, if it is an emergency at night, because of the health and safety implications, will be done right first time if it's not done first time in itself. So it depends on how many cat ones come in at the night, emergency ones, when they do them. But we are intending to do just that. But that does cost a lot more money. But however, we are doing it. And the same with the cat 3s. What we are also intending to do is trying to look at implementing more inspectors, so that we can ensure that we will be able to check and recheck cat 3s where they are, and especially where they're grouped together. We've just been to one where we've got some where there's cat 2s a lot grouped together, and we've been able to escalate that. So where we're looking at cat 3s where they are potentially going to change to cat 1s and 2s, we're trying to address those as well. And I think the transformation programme does just exactly that, really, with the extra inspectors and the extra vigilance. We're also actually looking to trial a vehicle that will actually be able to, within 1 week, travel all of our roads and actually give us a full inspection of what the states are, so that we could know that. So that's something that we're progressing at the moment.
Okay with that? Councillor Thompson? I'll give Councillor Williams a chance to sign the register. Well, the next question comes in from Councillor Pert.
Thank you. Can we just move to paragraph 35 and 36, which on page 16 or 18, depending on whether you're looking at the PDF or the document. One of the things that is always an opportunity within Staffordshire is to improve the GVA. And I think in so doing also improves the quality and variety of the jobs that are available. And what is clear if you look at the global market at the moment, or most of the developed world certainly, is there's a vacancy shortage, whether it's in the county, the country, or much of the rest of the world. And that's for a variety of reasons. But I think if you take the two things together, there seems to me to be an imperative need to improve the efficiency and output of what we do. And that probably relates to doing things in different ways. My question is there an opportunity for the County Council to support greater innovation in processes, the way things are done, to improve productivity and to improve efficiency overall? And in which case will we be better targeting funding at doing that rather than just per se at an area where in reality we're already doing as a county quite well, given our unemployment levels are 3.1% across the county, versus 5.3% against the West Midlands and 4.3% against the England average? Thank you.
Councillor White?
Thank you. I think one of the ways to address the innovation piece is to reimagine the way we do procurement. Certainly in the public sector, one of the problems with procurement has for a long time been that the public sector tends to specify the solution rather than the problem. If you specify the solution, which is that I need people, I need to procure a group of people to go out and deliver care, for example, that's exactly what you're going to get. If you specify the problem, which is there are people at home that are a little lonely and isolated, then the solution will be much broader and more interesting and potentially provide a more satisfactory outcome for the people who are in receipt of care. We have been trying to do this for a number of years with our commissioning setup, but there's more that we can do to release innovation. Cabinet got the chance to take a look at, within health and care, new ways of delivering support to people in care, which include tablet dispensers, yes, two other systems, which perhaps my memory's gone from the meeting. Perhaps Councillor Jessel could perhaps demonstrate to your committee in due course, because they're actually very interesting ways of delivering things in a different way, because we're thinking about, rather than the solution, we're thinking about the problem that needs to be solved. So hopefully that addresses your question.
I mean, brilliant. Yes, we will be more than delighted to ask Councillor Jessel to come to the Health and Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee in due course. Delighted with that suggestion. What about that wider commercial market? What about that wider sort of industry position? What role have we got, or could we take, in just encouraging greater innovation to close the county GVA gap?
The role of the public sector is to facilitate. If there are schemes that we can put in place to encourage innovation, you will have seen throughout the past 20 years, certainly things like the framework programs that were done by the European Union. You'll see the replacement of those where industry will be able to form consortia with universities and SMEs to start to develop new ways of working in new processes. I've been involved in innovation in business for 20 years, supported by government programs and EU programs. We need to make sure that some sort of successor emerges from that. Innovate UK has been the facilitator for that generally, particularly with the universities. So I suppose one way of approaching that is to maintain and develop our relationships with the universities and think about the sort of things that we can do. For example, in Councillor White's area, hydrogen energy is a very, very interesting piece at the moment, given the fact across the north of the county we've got engine manufacturers. I can't give you an answer to say this is what Staffordshire County Council is going to do to help with that, because we have no role at the moment in those sort of higher level things, but certainly we can work with our universities and industry to encourage them to take part in those pieces of innovation where they can, to increase jobs and growth. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Jill Heath is next. I just want to let Councillors DeVille, Atkins and Worthington know that it has not been forgotten.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it would be remiss of me, coming from the moorlands and all those miles and miles of minor roads that sort of get very neglected, not to have a little say to David here. Yeah, Connor and Sam have sort of raised the points of some of the points I was going to make. But could I just say the third category, it's sometimes never. They tend to get neglected. And it isn't really the water under the roads. Quite a few years ago now, we were doing efficiency drives and we cut down the number of gully emptyings in the rural roads. And that is a huge problem. The gullies are blocked. They're blocked not only in the gully but underneath to the next gully. If they were addressed, you wouldn't get the water on the surface, which wears away the road, which creates the potholes. So, you know, it's really, economy starts at the basis, doesn't it? Get your bases ready, and then you don't have all these huge problems. But I do appreciate that we've got things back in house, and you know, we are getting there. But please don't just think it's potholes. It's the gully emptying that is the crunch of a lot of your problems and causes a lot of expense. And when we come to report these potholes on the highway system, the report it system, and I do it most days, can we just readdress the way we report it? Because at the moment you can only do one pothole. So you do one pothole on a country lane and you get your name lane up in the lane, but it's about 2 miles long. So they either come back and say we can't find it, or they say, yeah, it's on the category 3 because they've not found it. And then you report another one. You can't report the row of potholes. So being as we're going to go out and do the cluster, can we address the reported system that we can report the cluster, please? Sorry if that's a big moan, but it's a big part of my life.
It's a big part of everybody's life. And I'm
Yeah,
amazed we got to 11 o'clock without mentioning
roads. We haven't got hardly any A roads. We've got all these miles and miles. Yeah, maybe there are too many roads into each village. And you nearly got lost, didn't you, finding me at Alstonfield. So you know how many little roads, and that's a big village. So, yeah, that's another story. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Williams, did you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. With regards to gullies, obviously we did an extra gully cleansing team this year, and just to let you know, we actually did a full county-wide gully review, which was carried out by Gary down in Lichfield. So what we have done is actually looked at the way that the data that came back from the gullies that was when they were cleansed, and we are starting to, and we are doing it at this moment, changing the amount of frequencies that each gully will get done. You are quite right about the gullies, but it's also about the ditches as well, which is why we are trying to ensure that landowners clear their ditches. It's not just farmers, obviously, but some farmers. And we've made it clear as well, and I've made it quite clear with the community highways teams, that where gullies and ditches are not being done, we need to send the letters out, and if they're not done, instead of waiting constantly, we will do them and do the recharge. We have that facility through legal, and we will be going that way if we can't do it. That stops this half of the problem, like you say, of the water being on the road. And where we have gullies, we are doing tenders as well to utilise another external gully team this year to address problem 1. So that will be working with yourself and your local community highways teams to be able to address those. And I think, as I say, from the last one that we had, and we only had it for 6 months, it made a huge difference, and they did do a huge amount of work. The one pothole at a time reporting, what you will find is that the new inspectors are being told when they go out that they will look around to see if there are other potholes there or the defects. Now, if they are category 4s, they might not get done. That's the small cracks and all the very small defects. But the cat 3s, when they're in a certain area, if they are clusters, they will be highlighted and they should be addressed. The reason why that you can't say 1 and there's 10 of them there, if they were all together, you'd take your picture and it's one pothole. But when they're spread along a road, unfortunately, that's the reason why it's a single time. But that is just to ensure that we can then get back to the person who's reported that particular pothole and be able to let them know. And as you are aware, and I don't know if you've got it yet, but I know it's being rolled out, that the new report system is on, where you get photos before and after when we've been and actually mended the defect. So that is now being rolled out. I know it's all the way from the south of the county up to here. I don't know if it's got up to the north yet, but we are rolling it out, and that will be out this year. So you will have before and after photos and actually be kept up to date with what's going on.
Do you want to put your microphone on, Councillor?
Say there's the defect and I put it on. It might be a 30-mile journey to go to that pothole to take a photograph, then go up again. You know, time, isn't it? So I don't tend to go and take a lot of photographs because, like I say, I refer back to Alstonfield.
It won't always be the fact that you have to take the photos. The actual inspectors will. So when they get there, they'll take the photos of before and after and then the teams are now taking photos of the work once they've completed the defect. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're customer focused. What we're trying to say is to a resident that thank you for doing that. We know about it. This is what we found. This is when we're likely to be doing it. Obviously weather and different commitments aside that we will likely be doing this repair. And then when it's done, we're letting them know again that it's been done and there it is. And hopefully members will be able to utilise that for when you see it in your areas where you'll be able to actually promote that, because what we really want is actually for highways to start being a positive rather than always a negative. It's a difficult sort of situation. It will always have issues, but I think the fact is if we are seen to be reacting properly and more effectively, then we can give out the confidence to our customers.
Move on to Councillor DeVille.
Thank you, Chairman. Nothing quite like highways, is there, to get us into the detail of things, Chairman. And I assure Councillor Heath and indeed Councillor Atkins that the people of the Moorlands are not being neglected, Jill, Charlotte. The people of Flash, Alstonfield and Longner are not being neglected. And it's not all about warm words. I do take your point, but it's not all about warm words. We want to, and we are, making a difference to the people in Alstonfield and Flash and other remote parts of the Moorlands. I think we've got to do that. If I may just refer very briefly to Councillor Pert's excellent point on innovation, we've absolutely got to innovate. You know, if you had building work done at home now, if you'd had it done 3 years ago, it cost you half as much. So the problem of inflation is not only a pound, shillings and pence problem, Chairman, it's a problem about being more productive, that productivity and additional innovation. You're quite right, Councillor Pert. And in the world of highways, for instance, we are looking at a local Staffordshire manufacturer of heavy equipment have a potential innovation in the world of highways, and we are testing the JCB Pothole Pro very, very soon, David, in different areas of Staffordshire. So that's innovation. I think we do need to look at the processes. And I know there's massive innovation in Richard and Councillor Jessel's world, much more important when we're looking at health and care, of course, than mending potholes. But of course, Chairman, we all see the roads, we all see potholes, and we are determined to make a real difference with our highways. And you know, the difference is, Chairman, over and above the innovation that we're talking about, it's that focus on our customer. You were talking about measurements, quite rightly. You know, if you can't measure something, you can't improve it. And you were talking about measurements of Cat 3 defect repairs. Our residents in our areas don't give a damn about how many Cat 3s we repair in a month or a year. What they do give a damn about is quality of workmanship, speed of reaction, and that pride in workmanship. And Jill, you were talking about, you know, the multiple defects in different areas. That's what we're looking at with this transformation. We've got more control, and we're now looking at, rather than repairing a defect, repairing a place. That costs, of course, but that's what we've got to deal with. But it's all about focus on our customers, improvements that they'll see, speed of response, quality of workmanship, and all importantly, Jill, that common sense approach to repairs. That £15.5 million additional investment will help, but I do maintain, Chairman, that it's not all about money, this isn't. A lot of it is about just care, pride in workmanship and a speedy response. And by bringing some of these areas of work back within our control, we've got greater control on that. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Charlotte Atkins.
Well, I'm very interested in what Councillor DeVille said, because I thought I'd test out the highway system. And I had a spare afternoon. This is going to sound really sad. But I decided to look at my own road, and I individually reported and measured 40 potholes. And I uploaded them on the system, one by one, as required, just to see what would happen. And sure enough, the more serious ones were done pretty quickly. And what about the ones nearby? No chance. They weren't done at the same time. So, you know, it's Park Road, it sits in Jill Heath's patch, not a long road, but, you know, people will say, well, why weren't the other potholes, which are going to now get bigger, done at the same time? They weren't done at the same time, and no doubt they won't be done at the same time. There was a quick response for the deeper potholes, but the others were not done. So certainly the new system didn't work a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully it will work in the future, because when people see a crew coming out, particularly as they pretty much block the whole road, so I had complaints, that, you know, why didn't they do the other potholes while they were there? Well, they didn't do them. Some didn't even make the cut in terms of any sort of repair. I didn't report all the potholes, that the 40 were just the worst ones. And I would have hoped that all of the serious ones would have been done, but only the very worst ones were done.
Does anyone want to respond to that? Councillor Williams?
I've got the easy solution is that actually we start the new transformation and all the work in July, so that's when it will start. That's why the difference, exactly like you said, that's what we're trying to stop and we're addressing now, and we're working with our teams to do just that, but it is July when the financial part actually goes into the highways area to do that.
Councillor Deville, you've got a very quick comment.
Very quickly, Chairman. Yeah, response to Councillor Atkins. Tell you what, Councillor Atkins, we're serious about this. Mr Williams is right, we've started this transformation now, and we really want to see and will see those improvements, because it's not just your issues, it's my issues in my area. Councillor Williams, Councillor White's issues in their area. We are really serious about delivering this transformation. And dare I say, Chairman, I've actually recently received some compliments on, not many, but I've received some compliments on our highways work. And as far as I can remember, in all the years of being a councillor, district councillor, county councillor, haven't received those in the past. So maybe we are turning the corner.
Councillor Williams, sorry for the delay.
Right. I'd just like to say really a big thank you for David. It's a thankless task, and I do as well share the concerns about the cost of materials, because I've got some men doing some building work, and the cost of materials is absolutely sort of virtually doubled in price. So, you know, you have an extra £15 million, but believe you me, it'll be swallowed up. But the system now with these reactive inspectors is certainly working well in Cheddleton. I had a pothole reported by a resident, which I didn't think was that bad, but it was outside his house. And when the big 30-ton vehicles go over, bump, bump, bump. And they came out and it was done within a week. So thank you for Mr Rollinson and Sheila Road Cheddleton. So thank you, David.
Ah, good.
Any comments on that? No? Okay. Unfortunately, Kath Perry did want to speak. She's left at just the wrong moment. If I just make one more comment then on a different matter, and that's about something that's particular to me. The mention of AVCs was on item 58, and there's a reference to 27,000 of savings. I'm just wondering who's making the savings. Is anybody able to answer that? Might be one for John Treadwell. So it's item 58 on the report, page 20. AVCs, as a result, there's a £27,000 saving. Who's making the saving?
We don't know the answer to that. We'll come back to you, Mr Chairman, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, that was a fill-in for Kath Perry, who's still not made it back. Okay. Just one other comment then on, there's a reference to a school boiler being given a heat pump solution. Are we making a more sort of 360 investigation of our quality of things like heat pumps in schools? Is that something anybody's able to comment on? That reference is on item 43, but it's one isolated instance of a heat pump.
Chairman, I would comment briefly on heat pumps and on environmental issues with our property generally, our estate of property. Massively important that we're looking at replacing all lighting with LED lighting. Obviously with heat pumps, jury's out really with regard to the cost of heat pumps. We're certainly looking at installing with new schools much more economic means of heating and lighting. And of course, with reference to heat pumps specifically, it's something that we'll be looking at working on as we move into the future. Also, Chairman, with regard to our fleet, we are looking now at replacing fleet with hybrid power of our fleet. With the larger areas of fleet, it's rather more difficult at the moment. But of course, Councillor Tagg would never forgive me if I didn't mention the importance of our environment. And environment has become, and the care of our environment has become, thankfully, part of our day job, hasn't it? All of us. It's all of our responsibility, and it's something that we're constantly looking at. How we can heat and light our buildings cheaper, more efficiently, and more environmentally friendly, Chairman.
And Councillor Perry, you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. It's to do with highways, sorry. We talk about the roads, and I know we've only got so much money to spend, but I'm also concerned about, and I wanted to raise it with you, footways, footpaths. They're a concern. I think we're all encouraged to go out, walk, healthy living, and all of that kind of thing. Disabilities, people in wheelchairs, and some of our footways, and they also pay their rates and taxes the same as the motorists do. So I think we mustn't neglect or forget, and I know we don't, but I can't see it in here anywhere, so I thought I would raise it this morning just so you can take it on board, that we need to look at our footpaths. As I say, we encourage people to get out, healthy living and all the rest of it. And I think some of them do need looking at as well as the roads, so thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Williams, is that a point to
Yeah,
note?
I'd agree with that, Councillor Perry. And actually, when you're looking at it, the footpath part of the statutory duty hasn't changed. We will still be assessing those and repairing it where necessary. The extra money is for highways, but we also put as part of that with the potential for a trial within South Stafford and Cannock to see what we can do within three-tier working. Yep, it is. That's South Stafford and Cannock, so we're doing both. And there's a potential of a trial there to be able to accentuate what we can do with our footpaths and pathways. So that'll be a story that we're ongoing, but the normal statutory duty and the normal statutory finance for that is still there. We have over 4,000 kilometres of footways that we have to do, and they will be assessed and rectified as normal.
We're off again.
I sense a bidding war coming this week.
Just a little local, please. Safety in numbers. I notice you're doing a trial both in the south of the county. Do one in the north. I have got Sheen Village. I've got emails now. Their footpaths, it's a long village, goes up through the village, just one footpath down. In a terrible state, they can't walk up and down it. So why don't we do one in the south and one in the north? Doesn't that make sense? Yeah. Why the south staff son? Oh, I give up. Does it something to do with the cabinet members?
I think we've got Councillor Pert speaking for the West.
I fully support what Councillor Mrs Heath has just suggested. Maybe there should be one in the West as well. Yarnfield Village has been waiting for its pavements, its footways to be repaired for the last 5 years, and I'd be delighted to offer Yarnfield as a site.
Being fair, Chairman, the reason why we're looking at those, and I know his staffs would like it as well, we'd like to do it everywhere. And Lichfield, obviously, is the reason is that we've already had 2 councils that wanted to work with us, and that's why we're doing a trial. This is the beginning of a journey, and no, I'm just saying that they've already offered, and it doesn't mean that we won't be doing other things with other councils. But at the moment, what we're trying to do is invest in the right places, and therefore that's why we're looking at this certain trial. But it is a more rural and then obviously more of a town area with Cannock, so that's what we're trying to look at the best ways to be able to prove to Cabinet about future investment, to be able to do more.
I
We have to buy it because we pay for it.
I'm going to conclude on item 4, which is our review of the past, because we then move on to item 5, which is the corporate delivery plan for 22-23, which we're already in. But this is a report which is about to go to Cabinet, and we've got the opportunity to review it as overview and scrutiny. Councillor White, do you want to lead in on item 5?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That has been the retrospective look. This is the forward look. And so just to remind members of the committee that the strategic plan is a 4-year plan looking across the entirety of the period of the administration. We break that down into year-long blocks, which is the delivery plan, and that is then translated into areas by portfolio with responsibility identified to each member of the Cabinet. There are a number of priorities in the delivery plan. We don't endeavour at all to capture everything that's in the strategic plan. There may be things in the strategic plan where you think, good, we need that, but actually there takes some preparatory work in order to deliver some aspects of the strategic plan. And you'll see some pieces of work that are taking place in the delivery plan represent the preparatory work that is necessary to get the delivery plan moving. We also need to be mindful of the fact that in the course of the delivery of the delivery plan, we will be from time to time confronted with crises. Let's give an example: the Ukrainian crisis, for example. And how we respond to that as well is something that we need to be mindful of, because sometimes there are things get in the way of the delivery plans, and it's important that the scrutiny committees bear that in mind as we progress through the year. There are some key highlights within the delivery plan I just want to draw your attention to. In families and communities, there are 4: embedding the Children's Transformation Programme, delivering special educational needs and disability strategy delivery plan, supporting resettlement of refugees, and deliver the education and skills strategy. Don't forget the white paper that I referred to, the schools white paper, is also coming up. We'll know what we need to do as part of that. In health and care, we're looking at developing pathways for care by streamlining systems and processes, including the implementation of adult social care reform. I think for Councillor Jessel and Dr. Harling, it's going to be a very interesting year as we move forward and think about how that white paper or the provisions of the reform will be delivered. Working with partners to develop a future social care workforce strategy, something I've been very keen on for many years, because it's a vocation as much as it's a job, and we need to make sure those people who choose to work in the sector are able to have pathways of development. We need to take a multi-agency approach to Staffordshire's Supportive Communities programme, and also move forward with the Health in All policies in partnership with our district and borough colleagues. In economy, infrastructure and skills, we continue to push forward on by enabling the sustainable development, improvement and management of Staffordshire's built environment, in particular HS2 and the road to net zero. The regeneration of Staffordshire's town centres with Councillor White is making progress, and we need to push on with that, as we do with the digital infrastructure programme and developing Staffordshire's connectivity strategy. The bus service improvement plan under Councillor Williams was a big, ambitious plan. We were disappointed, to say the least, to see the response of government having put all that effort in. I'm not quite sure, and I'll say this out loud, that government necessarily understands life in a rural shire county, ... at all, exclamation mark. So I was very disappointed with the response to that piece of work. In corporate services, we're working to deliver the Council's digital strategy and plan for 22-23, delivering the capital receipts programme led by Councillor DeVille. That has been a good success. We continue to deliver on that, but we want to work with our communities in areas where some of the assets are beneficial to communities and not just that capital receipt. We've established the Staffordshire Leaders Board, coming together in a way that we've not seen before across Staffordshire, working with districts and boroughs, and I think that adds power to our elbow. I'm committed to two-tier working. It seems to me that, in fact, three-tier working, it seems to me that the pandemic illustrated the importance of two-tier working. If you think about the business support that was got out the door by the districts and boroughs and the speed at which it happened, that was due to local knowledge. that couldn't have been done from a desk in Whitehall. It couldn't have been done from SP1. It was done brilliantly by districts and boroughs in partnership with the County Council. And it is that sort of thing that I want to augment. And then also the final point that Kerry had referred to on a number of times, developing the new communities delivery plan. When you move to the appendix, hopefully you'll note that we've done it in a sufficiently small font so you can't actually see it. If we fail to do that, we'll do it smaller next time. But what you also see is that there is no hiding from the accountability. And I look to the chairs of the Overview and Scrutiny Committees to pick up on those areas where you see the portfolio holder that reports into you and the expectation of what we're looking to have delivered over the next 12 months. We are clear about it. The accountability is clear. We are not hiding anything from anyone with this. And as far as Councillor Clements is concerned, she's out of the room at the moment, but you'll see with Councillor Williams here is promising to deliver during the course of the year, I think it was 18,000 was the number I saw. Yes, here we are, commitment to deliver 18,000 additional pothole repairs in year. I would expect a question on every single pothole during the course of the scrutiny over the forthcoming year, Mr. Chairman. So hopefully the committee can see that we are being very transparent with everything we're endeavouring to do here. You will, of course, as separate scrutiny committees, reflect on whether or not there's the strategic plan we've teased out sufficient to keep us busy during the course of the year. I think it's important that what we do is make sure that those things that we've teased out from the strategic plan into the corporate delivery plan are deliverable, are sufficiently ambitious for us over the forthcoming year, and are things that we can measure. I've got colleagues on the Cabinet who've always been very, very keen, I've known for many years, very keen on making sure that we do things that can get measured and then we can be held to account for. Credit to Alex Thorogood, who's joined us this morning for the latter. Thanks for being so patient for the latter part. He takes credit for giving us quite a few of the tasks that are on the list. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I hand back.
Indicating so far, we've got Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chairman. I really actually welcome this document. It does feel like it's a loving fest this morning, in as much as I think the vast majority of the actions are smart objectives. There's a few that aren't, but you know, I'm happy to sort of seed on those. I think they're also detailed actions. It's clear what we're setting out to do. We reinforce why Staffordshire is just a great place to live and work in and thrive in. It links a golden thread to the previous scrutiny session where the vision was set out. So I think that all of those are really to be welcomed. And I do, however, want to pick up your comment on the bus service improvement plan and note that there is some comments about bus services to school for entitled children. Always a funny phrase, entitled children. It conjures up something in your mind that isn't quite what you really mean. But I wonder what the County Council's response to the government's rowback from the implementation on the 31st of March of the PSVAR regulations is, and now the proposed phased implementation from September 23, and then thereafter based on the percentage of vehicle fleet adoption. Because clearly that's not what the government set out and told us they were going to do.
Mr. White?
No, and this is the point I made about responding to crises and sudden changes of heart by government. We have discussed at some length the home-to-school transport arrangements and the sudden change on the PSVAR. The onus is on the operator to demonstrate that they're capable of transition. We're waiting to see at the moment which operators are stepping forward to do that. It has been said on many occasions, Councillor Pert, that we don't run buses, and it's not for us to tell them what to do. It is for them to take responsibility themselves and market their services appropriately. So we're aware of it. We've discussed it. I've discussed it at length, and we will wait to see what those coach companies come back with. It's a passive. I appreciate it's a passive response, but at the same time, if those people that aren't willing to step up don't step up, then it's for them to be held accountable for that.
Councillor Charlotte Atkins.
I also want to ask about the bus strategy. As I understand it, the Stoke-on-Trent bid for monies for buses was successful and the Staffordshire County Council was not as successful. And I just wondered what the factors were, why you think that Staffordshire was not successful. I'm also concerned about, you know, the relatively small number of buses which are accessible to disabled people. I think it's very worrying, particularly in a rural county where people are, you know, using wheelchairs and so on, that the school transport is being impacted by a bus fleet which is not fully accessible. And I just think that at this day and age, that given how many people with wheelchair, who use wheelchairs, how much they rely on buses, particularly if they can't drive, that should be a very high priority. And I appreciate that we don't actually provide the buses, but it seems to me that if we are looking at an inclusive society, we must ensure that we put more pressure on operators to comply with basic accessibility requirements.
I'll come back on that one if I may, Chairman. Basically, the factors that actually came up with the fact that we were a rural area and some of our criteria was set by DFT were very much set around much more metropolitan areas. However, we were told one of the reasons is that we weren't being as we weren't putting in a big enough bid, which we can't really understand because it was £113 million we were after, and we got absolutely nothing. So it has been a massive, an absolutely massive drawback. However, I take your points about the access in schools. Just for information, the bus revenue grant is being withdrawn in October. We agreed to currently continue to fund that at full cost until then from the money that DFT were giving us. But there are going to be some serious issues when it comes to the buses in the future. They are looking at their fleets, they are looking at their routes, and so we've got officers who are now working with them to try to ensure that as much coverage is maintained. And even though we got nothing from the BSIP, the DFT are also saying that we still have to go along and continue with the bus improvement plan. So that's something that we're working with the operators on now.
Any comeback, Councillor?
Yeah, could I just ask, I mean, having not been successful with a bid, how does that affect our bus strategy plan? I mean, I was in London yesterday, and you know, buses whizzing past, and you know, various ex-colleagues of mine talking about getting so-and-so bus, and I sort of said, buses, what are they? You know, I mean, you can't rely on a bus system which if you're living in Leek, you know, the last bus to Stoke-on-Trent is 7 o'clock of an evening, and likewise coming back again. And you know, it's not really a service as such. It's sort of an intermittent service which people can't rely on either to get to work or to social activities or anything else. So what is the overall impact of that failure to get that bid? What does that mean in terms of what we won't be able to do that we were hoping to do with that money?
Quite easy to come back on that. The BSIP was never ever intended to start providing extra routes or to start doing subsidies. It was to improve the communication and the experience of people who use the buses. That was then to encourage people to get back on the buses and make them pay for themselves. As we've said previously, we don't run buses and these are private companies that do. So the entire point of the BSIP was to enhance both the experience and the communication to people who utilise buses, and hopefully that would then encourage and ensure that the bus operators would then improve their services similarly. Unfortunately, the enhanced partnership still has to go ahead with no money, so we will try to do what we can with that, but it is a financial issue that we aren't able to contribute to apart from what we get per year from DFT.
Councillor Thompson?
Mine's about education. I don't know if it's the right question to ask in here. I have a school that's local in my area that's just been Ofsteded, and they've been put down as needs of improvement. Now, I will add that my son goes to this school, and the ongoing problem they seem to have is teachers. They don't seem to have enough teachers to go around that school to be able to resolve those teaching problems. And my son will often come home and say he's had the art teacher give him a PE lesson, and it just doesn't seem to be working, and I'm just wondering how we address that. You did mention about academies, so I'm not quite sure what that meant.
Councillor White?
So the details in the school's white paper that's being published today sets out, as I said earlier, 4 components, one of which is an excellent teacher for every child, delivering high standards of curriculum, behaviour and attendance, targeted support for every child that needs it, and a stronger, fairer school system. So they were the headlines I mentioned earlier. Sitting underneath that is on the excellent teacher for every child, 500,000 teacher training opportunities, and an increased teacher salary scale. I think it's a starting point of £30,000 for some teachers to make sure that there are sufficient teachers for the children in the schools. So that will hopefully go some way to address what you're describing here, which is a shortage of teachers in the classroom. The other aspect to it in terms of multi-academy trusts and academies in general is that the white paper envisages the ability of local authorities for those schools that aren't already in an academy to become academised either by partnering with another academy or the local authority setting up an academy trust, a multi-academy trust itself. Our strong feeling is that we would prefer for existing schools to become part of existing MATs rather than forming a local authority MAT, but we wait to see the further detail of the paper itself, which will be published today. Doesn't give you an answer to the problem that you're facing right now. I appreciate that. I can't give you any sort of further detail on that. Is your school a maintained school, is it? Or is it a academy school?
No, it's a maintained one. It's a school.
All right, well, I can undertake to look into that with Jonathan Price.
I'm not asking for preferential treatment. I'm just using it as an example that they don't have enough teachers. No. And although the white paper may address that for the future, it's not addressing it for the children that are going into sitting for these exams that we're talking about that we want them to do, that I believe Tina brought up. And so, it's just a concern.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right to be concerned, that's for sure. So first port of call is get in touch with the Chairman of Governors and say, look, this isn't, I'm short of a teacher for my child, and
governors were failing as well. They also flagged up that they were
in which case it's a matter for Jonathan Price, then the portfolio holder for education, and send him an email, say you've raised it in this committee meeting, and ask him what he's going to do about it.
Thanks for that. Councillor DeVille indicated.
I'll be very, very brief. Firstly, in total agreement with Councillor Mrs Atkins' comments a few minutes ago about the operation of our bus services, and I eagerly await, Chairman, to see what improvements our bus companies do make to accessibility, to their reliability and regularity of service, to their quality of service. I wait with great anticipation to see what these improvements are made, Mrs Atkins. Improvements that other businesses have had to make, Chairman, who haven't received subsidies. So I await that with interest, Mrs Atkins. Finally, Chairman, thank you for inviting us to speak and comment this morning. I think it's been a really good meeting. Two areas of work that's constantly been mentioned this morning are health and well-being and that community spirit. And I emphasise, Chairman, that our 2022 Members Community Fund is now open, and I know that's really important to all of us, and that absolutely addresses that community spirit, the development of our relationship with voluntary organisations and projects that are aimed at the health and well-being of people within our county. So that's very welcome for all of us. And just as an instance, it's not all about great amounts of money, is it? Councillor Worthington and myself are contributing to a project as part of the Platinum celebrations next week. We're contributing £125 each to this, and that community, voluntary community organisation, Team Cheadle, who work incessantly throughout the year, totally committed to the people of Cheadle. They so warmly welcome that very small contribution. So it's a small contribution, but it does a lot, Chairman. And thanks again for inviting us to speak and share in this meeting, Chairman.
Okay. Can I echo the comments that have been raised by Councillor Pert in terms of the table, and thanks to Alex for putting the detail together. I think the comments that I would echo is that it's very smart. It's got all of the measurable, specific targets, and they're realistic and timely, etc., etc. The one comment I would make is a challenge to Councillor White's comment about no hiding places, because the table itself is very good, it's very thorough, but there are some places where there's a percentage, but we've got no percentage as the target. So I'll give you the example. Completion of induction training in the table is page 59 on the PDF or page 57 in the report. And sure enough, the target for induction training is a percentage, but we don't know what the percentage is. I would reckon it should be 100%, that everybody should be inducted. But there's no percentage there. So if we get to the end of the year and we've got 90% induction, but the target was 80% really, then that's a pass, isn't it? So in terms of hiding places, I would suggest that where there are percentages there but no figure, we need to know from an openness point of view what the target is. Otherwise, it's fairly meaningless. The other comment I would make is in relation to something that I think we talked about earlier, which is the importance, if you like, of the voluntary sector and also the parishes. There's a reference to two-tier working. Again, it's on page 54 of the report, or page 56 of the PDF, where it refers to working with the voluntary sector. It works, continues to work on two-tier working. I think that should be three-tier working. It's very important to work with the parishes, however they might be. I mean, they're obviously very disparate, but parish councils are very important to the well-being of the Staffordshire family. And I'll make that in relation to another comment, which is throughout the report. There's references without anything specific about town deals. For instance, there's a reference to a town deal where it's relating to libraries. There's a reference to town deals in relation to bid-ready projects. That's on page 68. And there's a reference to place marketing on page 70. So throughout the whole report, there's references to places and towns, but I don't see anything composite that's a recognition of where those town deals are. And I have to admit, as a Lichfield district representative, I'm not too sure which towns are in and which ones are out in terms of any discussions that might be taking place on Lichfield City, for instance. I'm a city councillor without any dealings. I don't know what's happening in Burntwood, Fazeley, Armitage, Hansacre, and so on and so forth. I'm sure we could go around the piece talking about where options are available. I just don't see any composite view on that.
Thank you, Chairman, for highlighting those things. This, of course, is pre-cabinet scrutiny. This is an opportunity to amend the document according to your findings. I think your point about the percentages is a fair one, and something we need to respond to that challenge. In terms of the towns, and indeed, you're much more than a town, Mr. Chairman. You're a city, so it's a city deal you're looking for, I presume. Yeah, we will. I'll ask Councillor White to go away and think about how he consolidates the work across the geography of Staffordshire so that it's easier to tease out precisely what we're expecting to have delivered. And there was a third point, which I've gone and forgotten what it was. Oh, yes, the three-tier working. You're quite right. It's a gap. We will address it, and we'll refer to parishes for those areas that are parished.
Are there any other comments on this? No. Kerry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add a little bit more detail to what Councillor White has said. Obviously, what we're trying to do in this corporate delivery plan is summarise a significant amount of detail and try and condense it as much as possible, despite the small font. Believers, we have tried to condense it. There are obviously detailed action plans that sit behind almost every line on this delivery plan in itself. The target point, we are continuing to work with the areas where there's gaps, and we'll continue to develop that through the year. And again, it might be something that individual scrutiny committees want to consider around delving into, you know, some of the detail behind some of these specific lines that are priorities for each of your committee. And a good example of that is there is a line in the delivery plan around a community's delivery plan, and just to reassure you, within that delivery plan there is significant work being undertaken to further strengthen the links with parish and town councils. So just to give you an illustration of this is trying to summarise a significant amount of detail. Thank you.
Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chairman. And actually, it does pick up, Kerry, the point, partially the point you just made. It does strike me there's huge amounts of detail in this delivery plan, which I'm sure the scrutiny committees will need to go through, and that's probably the intention, albeit there'll be no chance to do that before it goes to Cabinet. Is there some value in just ensuring that there isn't overlap between scrutiny committees? Because if I looked at risk-based scrutiny, you know, some of it is very obvious as to where it sits in terms of which scrutiny committee should look at the detail. But I don't think we could spend, you know, an hour on each block or 2 hours on each block and still not do more than scratch the surface. So I think it's really important the scrutiny committees, you know, do go through this in detail, but probably more importantly that there isn't a crossover between what, say, Bob's work committee is doing and what health and care is doing. And maybe that's something where I want to give some time separately to.
Yeah, it's obviously one for the chairman and vice chairman of the scrutiny committees. It's not one for cabinet to be concerned in, but we need to make sure we don't have that overlap or underlap, if that's the right expression to use. And we do have that review to make sure we don't do that. Any other comments before we move on? Well, we've been thanked by Councillor DeVille. Can I thank the cabinet on behalf of the Overview Scrutiny Committee for your attendance in sufficient numbers? And I think it's been a very worthwhile discussion, so thank you for that. You're welcome to stay or go as you please. And we've just got the one item to continue with, which is the work programme, which we'll attend to in a minute. Right, we're just going to check whether Councillor Worthington's aware of the fact we've still got agenda item 7 to go, which is the work programme. Hopefully you'll have that on the PDF. Are there any comments or adjustments that you wish to make? We're obviously on the cusp of a change from one year into the next. Most of the report we've got in front of us is greyed out. But there are quite a few things carried forward. We've got continued look at outside arm's length organisations, a revisit on digital, there's an aspect of data sharing, the people strategy, and drafting of bids was something we asked to have included. Is there anything else that's come out of today or any other items that people would like to add to the work programme, or is there anything you particularly want to change that we've already got on the work programme? Councillor Heath.
do a sort of a review of how the transformation's taken place 12 months from now? You know,
Well, again,
and it's not just really good ideas.
I think the transformation programme starting in July will need reviewing. It's a question of which committee it might
Oh, right.
be best
it might
reviewed
not
at.
be
And
come to this one.
make that as an
Yeah.
open comment.
I mean, I hope it works.
We have got a scrutiny chairs get together, so maybe certainly I think the Highways transformation programme will be featured, but without prejudging what we might discuss then, there are aspects of it that are corporate and there are aspects of it that are specific to Prosperous. Councillor Peters.
I can remember at the start of this term, Councillor White making it very clear that all the people that vote for elected members, potholes are very visible and it should be a priority. We need to get it sorted, it needs to be addressed. And I don't think we should let the Cabinet off in any way, shape or form from that commitment. So I think we should start the squeeze the closer we get to the next election to make sure that we're making some demonstrable progress on it. Because the public, colleagues must all be the same in terms of look at these potholes, what you're doing about it. They're not particularly interested in all the stats in Councillor Williams' emails. They want to know about their pothole. So I think we need to be mindful of that throughout our deliberations moving forward.
It has been noted, we'll obviously possibly have two bites of it. One will be looking at the corporate aspects of it. How's it working in terms of the relationship that might be centrally organised between us and the Council and Amy? And then, for instance, Prosperous might want to look at the performance figures and see whether anything's coming through in that way. So, probably get two bites at it. Is there anything else that we want to add or subtract from the work programme? Councillor Pert?
Can I just come back to my previous comment? When we do meet as chairs and vice chairs triangulation, I think it'd be useful to have taken this document and notionally allocated each block to somebody, really for debate and discussion between the chairs and vice chairs, because I am really concerned. I got caught a couple of months ago with a detailed question, and in my view, it should have sat with Bob, and I didn't challenge the response. And I think the danger is we either under or over scrutinise various things. And I have Francis in my ears, ringing in my ears on a regular basis, because under the Francis review, particularly for health, certain people were doing things they shouldn't be doing and other people weren't doing anything. And it really is, it's a risk when there are complex areas. I don't probably mean in terms of Prosperous, I mean specifically probably in a safeguarding issue. And it's very easy for people to make very broad statements like, well, mental health affects everyone, so it should be on every committee. No, let's be focused. Let's make sure we use the time we have available.
Yep, pardon the pun, it's a very pertinent comment to make, and I think we should have it on the agenda for our scrutiny chairs to decide. As a document, it'll be a useful starter point. Any other comments? No? Okay. On that basis, we'll conclude the meeting, and thanks for your attendance.